The air in my mother's house is always thick with memory. It is a specific recipe of scents: slow-cooked collard greens with a hint of smoked turkey, the rich, savory promise of a macaroni and cheese crust baked to a perfect bronze, and the unmistakable, loving weight of butter. This is the perfume of my childhood, the scent of Sunday. From the living room, I could hear the booming, joyful laughter of my uncles, a sound as familiar and comforting as the old hardwood floors that creaked under my feet. I was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of gravy, my mother's apron tied securely around my waist. It was a ritual, this dance in her kitchen. She would hand me a sprig of thyme, and I would know to crush it between my fingers before letting it fall into the simmering pot. No words were needed. Our communication was a language of gestures and knowing glances, forged over 30 years in this very room. "Marcus, honey, taste this for me," my mother, Teresa, said, her voice a soft, warm melody that cut through the chatter from the other room. She held out a wooden spoon laden with sweet potato soufflé. I leaned in, blew on it gently, and took a taste. The flavors exploded on my tongue: cinnamon, nutmeg, a touch of brown sugar, and love, an undeniable ingredient she managed to weave into every dish. "It is perfect, Mom," I said, and I meant it. Her smile was a reward, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done. This was our sanctuary, this warm, bustling kitchen. It was the heart of the home, and she was its unwavering pulse. I caught a glimpse of Nia then, standing in the doorway that separated the kitchen's warmth from the cooler, more formal dining room. She held a stack of my mother's good china plates, her posture a little too straight, a polite smile fixed on her face that did not quite reach her eyes. She had been arranging the table for the past 20 minutes, a task that should have taken 5. I knew she felt like a satellite orbiting our planet, close enough to observe, but never truly pulled into our gravity. "Marcus," Nia said, her voice light but with a deliberate edge, "could you come help me with the centerpiece? I cannot quite get it right." My mother waved a hand, not even looking up from the greens she was expertly portioning into a large ceramic bowl. "Oh, he is fine right here, Nia. I need my sous chef. You go on ahead, baby. We will be out in a minute." Nia's smile tightened. I saw the flash in her eyes, a quick spark of frustration that was there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. "Of course, Teresa. No problem at all." She disappeared back into the dining room, and I felt a familiar pang of guilt. It was a tightrope I walked every time we came here, balancing the deep, automatic loyalty I felt to my mother with the need to make my wife feel like she was my first priority. I took a step toward the doorway, intending to follow Nia, but my mother's hand settled on my arm. "Marcus, the pot roast needs to come out," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Your hands are stronger than mine. I do not want to drop it." And just like that, the moment was gone. I was pulled back into the fold, into the comfortable, demanding rhythm of my mother's world. I lifted the heavy cast-iron pot from the oven, the heat blasting my face, and set it on the trivet my father had made decades ago. This was my role. This was where I was needed. The dinner itself was a symphony of noise and love. Platters passed hand over hand, compliments flew across the table, and my uncles debated sports with a passion usually reserved for matters of state. Nia sat beside me, picking at her food. She laughed at the right times, nodded in agreement, but her hand in mine felt stiff. I squeezed it, trying to telegraph an apology, a promise that later it would be just us. She squeezed back, but the gesture felt distant. Later, in the quiet of our own apartment, the tension that had simmered all evening finally boiled over. The drive home had been silent, the only sound the hum of the engine and the weight of everything left unsaid. I was hanging up my jacket when she spoke, her voice quiet but sharp as a shard of glass. "I do not think you heard a single word I said at that table tonight." I turned to face her. She was standing in the middle of our living room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Of course I did, Nia. You were talking about the new project manager at your office." "That was an hour before we left," she said, her words clipped. "After that, you were gone. You were back in that kitchen, or listening to your uncle's story about the fishing trip for the 10th time. You were present in body, Marcus, but your mind was still at your mother's table." I sighed, running a hand over my face. I was tired, the good kind of tired that comes from a full belly and family, but it was a tiredness she clearly did not share. "It is Sunday dinner. That is how it is. It is tradition, you know that." "Tradition?" she echoed, and a bitter laugh escaped her. Is it tradition for you to jump every time she snaps her fingers? Is it tradition for her to dismiss me like a child who is getting in the way? She was not dismissing you, I said, my own frustration beginning to rise. She just needed help in the kitchen. She is getting older, Nia. She is 62 and she moves with more energy than I do. Do not use age as an excuse. Nia took a step closer, her eyes glittering with unshed tears. I am your wife, Marcus. This is our home. But sometimes I do not feel like I am your partner. I feel like I am the other woman. Do not be ridiculous, I said, the words coming out harsher than I intended. Am I? Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it was somehow more powerful, more devastating than any shout. Tell me the truth, Marcus. When you are in that house, who are you thinking about? When you are tasting her food, when you are laughing at her jokes, when you rush to her side before she even has to ask, who is the most important woman in your life? The question hung in the air between us, immense and terrifying. I could not answer it. The truth was a tangled knot in my chest. I loved Nia with a fierceness that sometimes scared me, but my love for my mother was different. It was the foundation of my entire life, the bedrock upon which everything else was built. They existed in two separate chambers of my heart, and I never knew how to explain that one was not greater than the other. They were just different. Nia watched my silence, and the hope in her eyes died, replaced by a cold, hard resignation. That is what I thought. She turned away from me, walking toward the window that looked out over the city lights. I cannot compete with a ghost, Marcus, and I certainly cannot compete with a living, breathing saint who lives 10 minutes away. I will not spend my life feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. You are emotionally married to her, and I am just the woman you come home to. The words struck a chord so deep within me that it vibrated in my bones. Emotionally married. The phrase was ugly, shocking, but it carried a sting of truth that I could not immediately dismiss. The image of my mother's grateful smile flashed in my mind, then the image of Nia's L-O-N-E-L-Y Chinese letter in the doorway. That is not fair, I whispered, but the protest sounded weak even to my own ears. Is it not? She asked, still not facing me. Then prove it. Prove that this, she gestured between the two of us, is your primary family. Prove that when a choice has to be made, you will choose us. I felt a cold dread wash over me. I knew what she was asking. She was asking me to build a wall where there had only ever been an open door. She was asking me to choose sides in a war I did not even know was being fought. But the pain on her face, the utter defeat in her posture, was something I could not bear. I had vowed to protect her, to make her happy, and I was failing. I walked over to her and placed my hands on her shoulders. She was trembling. Nia, I said, my voice low and strained. You are my wife, I love you, this is my family, you are my priority. She leaned back against me, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Promise me, Marcus. I closed my eyes, pushing down the unease that churned in my stomach. I was making a promise I was not entirely sure I could keep, but I saw no other way to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. I promise, I said, the words feeling like a betrayal of another vow, one made long ago in a sun-drenched kitchen. I will prioritize us. I will do better. She turned in my arms and hugged me tightly, as if I were a lifeline. I held her, hoping my embrace felt more convincing than my words had sounded. We stood like that for a long time, the city lights twinkling below, a silent testament to the fragile peace we had just brokered. But as I held my wife, my mind was elsewhere, already worrying about how I would explain this new distance to my mother, already feeling the fault line that had just cracked open beneath the foundation of my life. And I had no idea that my promise, made in a moment of desperate peace, was about to set a catastrophe in motion, a catastrophe that began with a simple, silent decision Nia made after she thought I had fallen asleep. The gentle hum of my desktop computer was the only sound in the quiet house, a familiar companion to my solitude. Carol had been relentless. It is just Facebook, Teresa. It is not a spaceship control panel. You can see pictures of your grandchildren without them having to print them and mail them. She made it sound so simple, so ordinary. And a part of me, a part I rarely acknowledged, was tired of feeling ordinary things were beyond my reach, so I had relented. The profile was sparse. A picture from last Christmas, my name, the city. It felt like standing on the edge of a vast, noisy party, hesitant to step inside. My finger, trembling slightly, clicked on the icon Carol called the news feed. And just like that, the party turned into a firing squad. It was the first thing I saw. A photograph of Nia, her head thrown back in laughter, one arm slung possessively around Marcus's waist. He was smiling too, but it was her caption that stole the air from my lungs. The words seared themselves onto my vision, finally taught my husband that his wife comes first, not his mother. Each word was a small, precise stab. It was not a general statement. It was a victory cry, and I was the conquered territory. My hand flew to my mouth, a pathetic attempt to stifle a gasp that echoed in the silent room. The humiliation was a hot flush that traveled from my cheeks down to my very core. She had not just drawn a line in the sand. She had taken a photograph of it and broadcast it to the world, with my son standing firmly on her side. Then my eyes, blurry with the first shock of pain, dropped to the space below the photograph. And there it was, the final, devastating blow. A tiny blue thumb, and next to it the name that broke me, Marcus Jacobson. He had seen this. He had read this public dismissal of my entire life's work, of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ounce of love I had poured into him. And he had not just allowed it, he had endorsed it. He had given it his digital blessing. That little thumb was a sledgehammer to the foundation of my world. The foundation I had believed was built on mutual devotion, on an unspoken understanding that family was an unbreakable chain. In that instant, I felt the chain snap, and I was left holding the broken, useless end. The cold began then. It did not start as anger. Anger is a fire, and this was an ice age. It started deep inside my chest, a glacial silence that spread outwards, numbing everything in its path. The cheerful yellow of my kitchen walls seemed to gray over. The familiar weight of the house settled into something oppressive. I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate, and I walked to the front door. I turned the deadbolt with a soft, final click. It was not just locking the door against the world. It was locking a part of myself away. The phone rang an hour later. I knew it would be him. His name flashed on the screen, a relic of a happier time. I watched it ring. I did not move. Each ring was a tremor against the ice, but the ice held. The voicemail indicator lit up. I did not listen. The silence I was cultivating was my only defense, my only language. He called again, and again. The persistence, which once would have been endearing, now felt like an intrusion. Then came the knock on the door. Firm, familiar. "Mom, Mom, are you in there? Your car is outside." His voice, muffled by the solid wood, was laced with a confusion that almost cracked my resolve. Almost. I stood on the other side of the door, my back against it, my eyes squeezed shut. I could picture his face, the worry in his kind eyes, but all I could see was that blue thumb. "Teresa," he tried again, his knock softening to a plea. "Please, I know you are upset. Let me in, we can talk." I did not answer. The silence was my answer. It was heavier than any shout, more profound than any accusation. I let it hang in the air between us, a solid, impenetrable wall. I heard a long, weary sigh, then the sound of his footsteps retreating down the porch steps. The erosion of his foundation had begun. I had simply stopped being the bedrock. On the other side of the city, the foundation of his own home was cracking under a different kind of pressure. Marcus did not merely walk into his house. He crashed into it, the storm of his frustration rolling off him in waves. Nia was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, a picture of calm that ignited his temper. "What did you do, Nia?" The question was a low growl, ripped from a place of deep hurt. She looked up, her expression one of mild annoyance. "What are you talking about, Marcus?" "The post, that post about your husband putting you first. Did you have to say it like that? To the entire world?" Nia put her phone down, her defiance rising to meet his anger. "I was celebrating us. I was setting a boundary, something you seem to have a very hard time doing." "A boundary?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "That was not a boundary, Nia. That was a public execution. My mother saw it. She saw it, and she saw that I liked it." "Good," Nia said, her voice sharp. "Maybe now she will understand. Her little boycott, refusing to answer your calls, turning you away, it is proof, Marcus. Proof of exactly the kind of manipulation I was talking about. This is not a normal reaction. This is a guilt trip, and you are falling for it." "You do not get it," he shouted, the sound echoing in the tidy living room. "This is not a game. You have no idea what you have done." The sound of her silence, it is worse than anything. "I stood at her door today, Nia. I begged her to let me in. My own mother would not look at me." His voice broke, and the raw pain in it was unmistakable. "I liked that post without thinking. It was a stupid, reflexive click. but seeing her pain, my God, I have never regretted anything more in my life." Nia stood up, her own pain now warring with her righteousness. "And I regret that you regret it. That post was the truth. I am your wife. I should come first. Why is that such a controversial statement? Why does stating that simple fact feel like I am declaring war on your family? Her pain is not because of my post, Marcus. It is because her control is slipping. And you, by feeling this guilty, are handing it right back to her." They stood feet apart, a chasm of misunderstanding and wounded pride between them. He saw a cruel and unnecessary attack on the woman who raised him. She saw a necessary stand against a lifetime of subtle domination. In that moment, they were not husband and wife. They were opposing generals on a battlefield I had never meant to create. Marcus looked at his wife, at the unwavering certainty in her eyes, and he felt a profound loneliness. He had lost his mother's warmth, and now the solidarity of his marriage felt brittle, conditional. He had no safe harbor. "I need to fix this," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Nia crossed her arms. "There is nothing to fix on our end. The problem is not this post. The problem is a lifetime of coming second. I will not apologize for wanting to be first." Defeated, Marcus turned and walked out of the room, the argument left hanging in the air, unresolved and toxic. He went to his home office, a room that now felt like a cage. He sank into his chair and stared at his phone, the instrument of all this chaos. He opened his contacts and scrolled until he found my name. Mother. His thumb hovered over the call button. He had to make me understand. He had to explain that the like did not mean what I thought it meant. He had to bridge this impossible gap. He took a deep, shaky breath and pressed call. He listened, his heart pounding, as the line began to ring. Once, twice. And on the third ring, in the cold, silent fortress of my home, I picked up the phone. The silence in our apartment had become a third occupant, a heavy, suffocating presence that Nia and I tiptoed around. Weeks had bled into one another, a monotonous stretch of strained politeness and unanswered questions. We shared a bed but slept on the very edges, a canyon of unspoken accusations between us. The love I had fought for so publicly now felt like a fragile artifact behind glass, something to be observed but not touched, its value diminished by the cost of acquiring it. My phone, which had once buzzed constantly with messages from my mother, remained dark. That silence was a constant, aching reminder of the void I had created. The call, when it finally came, was not from her. It was from Aunt Carol, and her voice was stripped of its usual warmth, sharpened by an urgency that sent a jolt of cold fear straight to my heart. "Marcus, you need to come to St. Jude S. Now, it is your mother." The world tilted. I remember the floor feeling unsteady beneath my feet. "What happened? Is she okay?" There was a pause on the other end, a silence filled with reproach. "The doctor says it is her heart. The stress, these last few weeks, it exacerbated a condition she did not even know was this severe. She collapsed, Marcus." Each word was a physical blow. The stress. The last few weeks. She did not have to say it, the indictment was clear. My betrayal was not just an emotional wound, it had become a physical weapon. I had given my mother a heart condition. I muttered something to Carol, I do not even remember what, and ended the call. Nia was watching me from the doorway of the kitchen, her face a mask of concern that could not completely hide a flicker of apprehension. "What is it?" she asked. "It is my mother. She is in the hospital." I could not look at her as I said it. I was already grabbing my keys, my wallet, my mind a chaotic storm of panic and guilt. The fancy car I had bought with my new wealth felt absurd, irrelevant, as I sped through the streets, every red light a personal affront. All I could see was my mother's face, not the stern mask from the wedding, but the soft, smiling one from my childhood, the one that promised everything would be all right. I had broken that promise. The hospital hallway was a sterile, fluorescent nightmare. The smell of antiseptic filled my nose, and the hushed tones of the staff seemed to amplify the frantic beating of my own heart. Aunt Carol was standing outside a room, her arms crossed tightly. She did not hug me. Her eyes, so like my mother's, were hard. "She is stable," she said, her voice low and tight. "But it was a close thing, Marcus. She has been carrying this weight for years. The doctor said her blood pressure has been dangerously high. And then you," she trailed off, shaking her head. "She did not want to worry you, she never does." "Can I see her?" The question came out as a whisper. Carol studied me for a long moment, a judgment happening behind her eyes. Finally, she nodded, stepping aside. "Do not upset her," she warned, a final, quiet threat. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was dim, the only light coming from a small lamp near the bed. And there she was. My mother, Teresa, looked smaller than I had ever seen her, swallowed by the white sheets and the tubes trailing from her arm. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and the lines on her face seemed deeper, etched by pain. She was awake, her eyes fixed on the window, on the gray expanse of the parking lot outside. She did not turn as I entered. I stood there, just inside the door, my throat constricted. The sight of her, so fragile, unraveled me completely. The triumph I had felt at the wedding, the defiant joy, it all crumbled to dust. This was the true cost. This was the unthinkable reckoning. "Mom," I managed to choke out. She turned her head slowly. Her gaze was not angry, it was exhausted, deeply, profoundly tired, and that was worse. "Marcus," she said, her voice was thin, raspy. I moved to the chair beside her bed, my legs unsteady. I reached for her hand, the one without the IV, and she let me take it. Her skin felt cool and papery. I bowed my head, my forehead nearly touching the bed rail. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. "I am so sorry. Mom, I am so sorry. I did not know. I never would have." "I know," she whispered, and those two words held a universe of pain. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the steady beeping of the heart monitor and the ragged pull of my own breathing. That machine, with its rhythmic pulse, was a terrifying reminder of how close I had come to losing her. It was a truth more shocking than any headline. "I thought I was losing you," I said finally, the confession tearing itself from a place I had kept locked away. "When I was with Nia, it felt like I could finally breathe. But away from you, it felt like I was tearing myself in two. I did not know how to be your son and the man I wanted to be. It felt like I had to choose." Teresa's eyes glistened with tears she would not let fall. She took a slow, careful breath. "I was not asking you to choose, Marcus. I was only asking you to remember." Her voice gained a sliver of strength. "That woman, Nia, she represents a world that wants to forget. A world that sees our history, our struggles, as something to be overcome and left behind, like a ladder you kick away once you have climbed up. When you chose her, in that way so publicly, it felt like you were erasing me. Erasing your father. Erasing all the sacrifices we made so you could stand where you are today." A single tear escaped and traced a path down her temple into her hairline. "My deepest fear was that you were ashamed of where you came from, that you wanted to trade our hard-won, complicated truth for something simpler, something easier." Hearing her say it, hearing the core of her fear laid bare, was like a key turning in a lock inside me. I finally understood. It was never just about Nia. It was about what she symbolized to my mother. A dismissal. An invalidation of a lifetime of battle scars. "I am not ashamed," I said, my voice fierce with emotion. "I could never be ashamed. You are everything to me. What Dad did, what you overcame, that is the foundation of who I am. I was selfish. I was blind. I thought I could have my future without honoring my past. I see now that I was wrong." I squeezed her hand, and for the first time I felt her fingers tighten around mine. It was a small movement, but it felt like a seismic shift. We did not embrace. We did not declare everything forgiven. We just sat there in the quiet hum of the hospital room, two wounded people acknowledging the damage. We had found a painful, necessary understanding. The bond was scarred, but it had not broken. The peace that followed was fractured, a delicate thing. My mother came home, and I visited every day. We talked about small things, safe things. The shadow of the wedding was always there, but we had learned to navigate around it. The victory I had won felt hollow because it had left everyone defeated. Back in my own home, the silence had changed. It was no longer just heavy, it was resigned. Nia tried at first. She asked about my mother, she suggested dinners, but every attempt felt like walking on a floor riddled with hairline cracks. The foundation of our marriage had been shattered the moment my mother collapsed. We had built our union on the idea of a love that conquers all, but we had not accounted for the collateral damage. One evening, about a month after my mother was released, Nia and I were sitting on the sofa, a documentary playing on the television that neither of us was watching. The distance between us felt vast. "She will never accept me, will she?" Nia said, her voice quiet and flat. It was not an accusation, just a statement of a fact she had come to accept. I looked at her, at the woman I had moved heaven and earth to marry, and I felt a profound, weary sadness. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "And I do not know if I can ever fully be the husband you need me to be while I am trying to be the son she needs me to be." The words hung in the air between us, the unvarnished truth of our new reality. Nia nodded slowly, her eyes not leaving the screen. She did not cry. She just reached over and took my hand, her grip firm but final, as if she were holding onto something she knew she was already letting go. And in that simple, quiet gesture, I felt the dream we had fought for so violently begin to dissolve into a future I could no longer see.